record. Hello, hi Suzanne. Hello, everybody.
Hi, thank you for joining us in Traversing the Widest Orbit.
So, Suzanne, where are we going today? Where are we traversing?
Ontological pluralism. We want to traverse that concept and set it forth.
Right. So in this episode, we'll be looking at ontological pluralism. And what is interesting is that this concept is fundamental to our entire channel and our entire methodology, the approach that we are adopting. So it only makes sense to begin our first episode with with an explanation of what ontological pluralism means. Uh, and so let's get to it. We do have a PPT slide deck which we would like to present. So while I do that, um, why don't you, Suzanne, introduce us to the phrase and how we ought to understand it?
Sure. Um, so our the concept of ontological pluralism is being taken from work scholarly work that is done on the later Heidegger's thinking about being and beings. And it's you could call it I hesitate even to call it a perspective because just the term a perspective is sort of monofocal,
Yeah.
and ontological pluralism itself is not that at all. Um, Rather, we might call it a multifocal perspective, and not one with any limits either.
Yeah.
um, and so I think if we look at the quote, maybe
Yes.
from scholar Ian Thompson, he's a well-known Heidegger scholar. We can look at this quote from his 2011 essay, Transcendence and the Problem of Otherworldly Nihilism.
And as
Here,
you were telling me, this is one of the best summaries of ontological pluralism in Thompson's work. So this
yeah, I
captures
think
the
so.
essence and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
let's
he
take a look.
offers various, as you know, he offers different
Yes,
formulations, if you will, or yeah, formulations of the definition, you might say.
right.
But this succinct and I think quite clear.
Yes.
I'll just read it. Heidegger's ontological pluralism thus suggests that the meaning of being itself is intrinsically multiple, and that this multiplicity of genuine meanings can never be reduced to a single, all encompassing understanding. Okay.
That's interesting. And what immediately comes out in the reading is that uh, meaning making is never ending, and therefore interpretation, the task of interpretation, uh, is never quite exhausted by any one super interpretation or any one
Right.
total interpretation. That's what immediately strikes from this quotation.
Right. Every interpretation, we could say, of any given thing, of being itself, say a text or a vista or an idea, is always limited
Right.
and therefore not exhausting all possibilities.
Hmm.
That, of course, necessitates that we always remain ever open to new and different ways of understanding whatever it is we might be looking at or talking about. Um, the one thing I would point out here, as you know, Bharatwaj, is that there's a strong tolerance
Hmm.
tied to ontological pluralism, and the only um, thing that's not tolerated is intolerance
Mm,
itself.
yeah.
Um, so ontological pluralism rejects the idea of any one final truth,
Mm,
any one final system, one final way, and any and all fundamentalisms must be rejected
yes.
from the point of view that is ontological pluralism.
Mm. I also I also hear in the quotation and also the way you explained it, I also hear a very interesting paradox at the root of the meaning of ontological pluralism, and that is that the recognition of finitude or the recognition of limitation goes hand in hand with the recognition of multiplicity and even infinity of
Absolutely.
possibilities of meaning. So,
Absolutely.
right. So, the recognition that all my understanding is fundamentally limited uh, is at the same time the recognition, it is simultaneously the recognition that there are other possible understandings or ways of understanding outside my compass. And this
Right.
compass is not all encompassing. So,
Right.
so I see this paradox playing out really beautifully in both the definition and the way you explained it.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And there's going to be a lot of a lot of places we traverse in our various episodes and but central to what you just articulated, two things come to mind. And first is just truth understood as aletheia, which is that truth is infinite. This is capital T truth. It's infinite. We are finite and limited beings. Thus, no matter how much we might strive to attain and to gather, if you will, when it comes to knowledge, our insight, etc., our interpretations, our meanings, all of that is always still undertaken and understood as only being part of the story, so to speak. There's the truth itself infinite. We are finite, which is actually very exciting because there's always more to discover. There's always new vistas and vantage points to behold. And additionally, you kind of said you used the word limit, I think, a moment ago,
Yeah.
and you actually brought this up in a previous conversation we had, which is that, and might seem paradoxical, but whenever we actually are able to understand or recognize a limit of any kind, say that, the boundary of our property, even, or the boundary that is our physical body, there is simultaneously with that recognition of the limit, the understanding that there is beyond the
That is
limit.
beyond. Yeah.
So that's helps with different ways of couching the concept, uh, given that people learn in all kinds of different ways. And um, so yeah, so ontological pluralism, uh,
I
maybe
thought
this.
one more thing. I'm sorry. One more
Yeah,
thing that you mentioned, which is, I think, really important in our current time, our current situation in the world, is you brought up the topic of fundamentalism and how uh, thinking of limits and boundaries. You also gave the example of the boundary of a property. So how it is really interesting to think of how thinking about limits and boundaries humbles us enough and disabuses us of the notion that our understanding is the ultimate understanding.
right,
And therefore, I mean, and that is the step towards fundamentalism. So this also has a lot of practical significance. I mean, it's not only an abstract concept, but it can be, we can both see this played out in the world, by which I
right,
mean uh, people thinking or systems of thought considering their understanding to be the ultimate one. We can see this being played out in the world. And it also has the other practical significance of actually making uh, ontological pluralism a lived reality in our worlds, in our personal lives, in our socio-political engagements, and so on. So it has a lot of practical significance as well, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, uh, a connection that I always think of in that regard is the way in which an understanding and recognition and embrace of ontological pluralism, it seems to me, is the heart of true epistemic humility.
Epistemic.
Um, the recognition that there is always more to learn, no matter what. It doesn't matter who you are, what you know, what you think you know. There truly is always more to know. And it seems to me that's kind of self-evident,
Hmm.
but apparently it isn't in our world. There are people and systems and movements and such where they are convinced that they have the final truth, the one truth, the only truth.
Yeah.
Um, it's sad and silly, but it's potentially very dangerous as well.
And
And yeah,
speaking of the danger, it also is so insecure, right? I mean, it's never because, I mean, in a way, though it considers itself to be the ultimate, it never is sure of this, or it's never secure in this knowledge. So it always wants to, in a way, guard this forcefully. So
right,
that this also
right,
leads to violence, uh,
absolutely,
danger
right,
and danger in the form of violence and
right,
fundamentalist fanatical violence is so much part of the history of our century and of the previous century as well. So, yeah, that's also another
right,
thing to keep in mind, I think. Yeah,
absolutely. And the even if we don't want to use violence, if we just say aggressive, let's say an aggressive defense of a given position or a perspective or a belief,
yeah,
there's certainly nothing wrong with being passionate, being
no,
assertive, but if and when a given point of view is unwilling to entertain different points of view,
yeah,
that is when we know that a fundamentalism is afoot. Because, if we are secure in our position, as you mentioned the notion of security, if I hold some kind of point of view about say the meaningfulness of art, and I feel secure in that perspective, then I'm not going to violently suppress someone who wants to offer a different point of view, whether it is in direct conflict with mine or not. They're all just perspectives and facets
hmm,
of being and of being a being in the world.
right,
Um, and so, maybe you should take us to your next slide and uh,
yeah,
go on with the rest of this sort of these terms. Just we don't want to be overly pedantic or technical or use jargon, but we do just want to make sure that it's a baseline understanding of terminology that we'll be using here and there,
right.
given its
Um,
background that we're coming from.
Yes, and especially the word being, which we have been using. And the term being is so central to Heidegger. So, so we would like to open that word up a little bit to the audience. But before we do that, I thought because you just mentioned art, I thought we could maybe spend a little bit of time on a piece of art, an artwork by painter who and this sort of the way he painted this and his whole process of painting this scene captures the notion of ontological pluralism quite well. So I thought maybe we could just talk about this for a minute and then go to the go to the second slide. So this is my last slide though, so I jumped from the
Sure,
first to the last now.
sure.
So it's a French painter. I'm going to butcher the pronunciation perhaps. So Paul Cézanne
Hmm.
um, apparently painted this mountain 30 times. 30 times he painted this, and even in the 30th painting, even in the 30th rendition of this mountain, he could not exhaust its meaning. So the mountain and the entire scenery sort of kept coming to him in new facets, as you so beautifully put it. So, so, so in a way, that also captures what we are trying to say with ontological pluralism, that meaning is inexhaustible, and the process of making meaning, the process of understanding is also likewise inexhaustible. So maybe that gives a pictorial
Right.
representation
And
of what we are talking about. Yeah.
certainly, and then just very quickly, as a way I sometimes used to explain it to students, even if we were standing outside and looking at this mountain, um, even if we stood out there every day for a year, what we would be able to phenomenologically behold is the way in which the mountain is unconcealed to us
Mm,
in new and different ways,
yes.
day after day, various times of day, the way the landscape around the mountain appears to us at different times of the year, whether there's a cloud cover, shining sun, full moon, no moon. It's continuously this process of unconcealing, which is the heart of truth as aletheia, so that all and any unconcealment continues to have concealment at its heart. And even if we took pictures of this mountain for a lifetime, the reality is that there's still another side to that mountain. There's other sides all around and different vistas with from which to view that mountain.
Right.
And so hopefully that helps as well with the being of the mountain, ontologically plural, inexhaustible in the way it is unconcealed to us.
Beautiful. So with that, we could go to the concept of being itself in Heidegger. Um, these are like three questions that we thought we could discuss. Let's see if we finish tackling all of these, but we'll sure try. So the first question here is, because we spoke about being so much, what does being mean? What is the meaning of being? So here's representation, an attempt through a simple sort of illustration to get to what Heidegger is saying. So on the screen here, we have like three trees and a person, a human being. And the human being in Heideggerian terminology is called Dasein, which is generally translated as being there. We'll get to the specifics of that perhaps today or maybe in another episode. So, one thing that is clear, immediately clear, is that there are beings or entities in front of this person. There are three entities, three individual, discrete beings, and the entities present themselves, show themselves, reveal themselves to Dasein through the meaning that they make or have, and the way that Dasein is able to engage with their meaning. So that's the first thing that is sort of immediately clear.
Right. And I would say here, just for clarity, um, when we write, sometimes people will capitalize being when they mean being
Yeah,
in itself, being as such, and then lowercase b for beings like the trees and the men and my cats and so forth.
Right.
Um, the all beings derive their being from being. And so that's and I think a lot of people have at least heard something about this distinction, even if it's in a completely different context than, say, a philosophy course or what we're doing here. Um, you know, the meaning of being, either understood as just the meaning of existence or the meaning of being as that from which all beings
Mm,
their being, right?
right.
It kind of sounds like a word salad, or like it's supposed to be a trick or a riddle, but it's conceptual distinction, and I think most people are, with it enough to grasp that. Um, but definitely, we have a human and three trees. All four are beings, right? Or entities, and that is different than being itself, being as such, or being in itself, depending how it's worded. Um,
Mm, yes.
and
Yeah.
the ontological pluralism, just to tie it in real quick, um, ontology, which you were gonna set that forth for us, but the study of being, right? So it's just simple to say that all beings are derived in whatever way we're going to talk about from being with a capital B.
Mm,
Okay. And so ontological pluralism in one sense is simply obvious, right? Being is plural. There's all
yeah.
kinds of beings around me right now. They're in the other
Right.
rooms and
Yeah. Yeah.
outside, right?
There is an elementary pluralism to ontology.
Right.
That's a very interesting,
Absolutely.
interesting point. So you put this wonderfully, like, so beings, entities derive their meaningfulness, or derive their ways of being, or derive their being from being
Mhm.
itself, right?
Mhm.
However, in Heidegger, this gets complicated because for him, being or being itself is not itself a being. So it's
Right.
not as if there is a super being which is granting being to these
Right.
individual entities. So
Right.
that brings us to the ontological difference that being is not itself a being.
Exactly. That's right. And that's perfectly worded. Being itself is not a being. It is not an entity, and not an entity that grants to the beings their being. It's something ontologically different.
Right. So granting that, the question then becomes how exactly do we understand being as such or being itself if we are not supposed to understand it as a super being, as a hyper entity, which is granting being or existence or ways of being to these individual entities? So that becomes the question. And in a way, this is something that I've had occasion to write also. I don't remember where, but maybe in one of my footnotes. I don't remember. But I feel as if the whole labor of Heideggerian scholarship is to tackle this difficulty.
Right.
So, so how do we think about being as such, being itself, without thinking of it as a being, an entity? And
Very
that's
carefully. Very carefully. We
very
do it very
careful.
carefully.
Yes.
Um, and with a willingness to always step back if needed, and to
Mm.
um, revise, and again, recognizing that central, and you tell me if this wording sounds good to you, Bharatwaj, but that being itself is inherently, inescapably a mystery in
Mm.
Heidegger's understanding,
Yes.
as are the gods who derive their being from being also.
Mm.
So we can definitely talk and gain understanding and um, expand our perspectives, if you will. But anyone who claims to have reached the end, right?
As not.
We have it that they've already failed, at
Yeah.
least, from a Heideggerian approach to these matters.
Mm, mm. So that's a good reminder. And also, it also gives us the chance to say then that as we continue our episodes in this series on ontological pluralism, and it has to be a series of episodes because of the difficulty of what we're dealing with something which is inherently mysterious. So this mystery is something that we will keep wrestling with as we do our further episodes. However, maybe as a small sort of scratching of the surface, we could maybe say that the way that Heidegger, at least in his later works, attempts to solve this question of conceiving of being itself while also not converting that being as such or being itself into a being, into an entity, is through one way, is through the understanding that being is inherently historical in the sense that being gives itself as a structure of meaning for a period of time and
Mhm,
also stands back,
mhm,
also withholds itself.
mhm.
So it gives itself, but its giving is also a withholding,
Right,
um, which these other possibilities
right,
may show themselves later in history or whatever. We don't know. But one thing that he does clearly say, and he says this in many, many places, and we'll have occasion to show you all the quotations as well as we move further. But one way in which he does this is to say that being steps back, and its stepping back is the giving. So
right,
one way then to understand this could be like this. A simple explanation would be that, um, and this is a simplification, so do bear that in mind as well. So if in the Platonic period, being shows itself as being ultimately the ideas. So all the individual entities for Plato can be reducible to the ideas, to the forms. If that's the core meaning that being gives to that period, it also withholds other ways in which meaning can be grounded.
right,
So, in a different epoch, in a different period, like the period of late modernity with people like Nietzsche, um, being has now shown itself as will to power, for example. But that is also not the final answer, because even there, even as being is giving itself or showing itself as being ultimately the ground of all things as will to power, it is also stepping back. There are also
right,
possibilities of grounding these entities and their meanings which being is not giving. So, so this way, uh, being is simultaneously the ground on which all these entities are grounded, and it is not that ground because that is only
right,
one facet that it has given, and all the other possibilities have been withheld, right?
right.
So, In that
That
way,
makes me
yeah, sorry. Yeah.
no, that is where I would just bring in I know you like it as well. Ian Thompson's phrase constellation of intelligibility.
Yes, the constellation
So
of intelligibility.
most of us can, use that quite easily to think about if we have ever looked at the sky and looked at constellations.
Right,
So any given epoch, like you're talking about, the epoch of Plato, we're viewing a specific constellation of intelligibility that's been gifted or granted to us by being, but yet being in giving us that is also withdrawn. And thus, there are not just one or two or three
right,
constellations of intelligibility.
right.
There could be myriad
Myriad.
and
Yes,
endless. And we are, how we are understanding things is clearly grounded in a particular one.
yes,
But if we're thinking in the way Heidegger calls us to do, we can recognize that it's not the only one.
it's not the only one.
And that boundary itself, right, is what opens up something beyond itself,
Right. Which,
right?
which you so nicely tied this back to the concept of the boundary and of limitation and ontological pluralism and so on. The next point, which we'll have to take up further in our upcoming episodes, but what is important now is to also say that it's not the stepping back of being is not some entity stepping back,
Right,
but it is not different from the very delimited, contoured, finite nature of all constellations of intelligibility. The very finitude of these constellations is the stepping back of being,
right,
right? So, which means that all these constellations are can be transgressed. You can have other
mhm,
constellations. Meaning can transform or reconstellate itself in myriad ways. So
right.
yeah, so I think those points should be enough as a you know as an
A good
introduction
starting point.
starting point.
Yeah, it's a good
Yes,
starting point for the
yes, yes,
for the concept. But yeah, I'm already seeing that we should probably do
yes,
one or two more
yes,
episodes where we pick these strands up and continue to weave
yes,
weave our tapestry that that itself again is never claiming to be the entire story or the end of the story or the whole story, but rather facets or vistas, perspectives,
right,
um, that can, when really sort of entered into and embraced, can make virtually anything so much more rich and interesting. Um, so yeah, I feel pretty good about that introduction there. And we don't want to be too, technical. And again, we want to do public philosophy. We don't want to lay a lot of jargon. Uh,
yeah,
but as those who enjoy thinking and reading and art and such, sometimes there's some new things that have to be learned, and then you make those part of your toolkit. And
absolutely.
the more tools you have, the greater things you can create, right?
And the
So
more empowered you are.
absolutely, absolutely. So thanks so
Thank
much to
you.
Bharatwaj and
Thank
to anyone joining us. And yeah, we're looking forward to doing more of this. And at some point, we will absolutely be uh, inviting anyone interested to suggest topics or works, passages, books, films,
But
music, anything that you're
but
interested in
Suzanne,
looking at.
before that, that's awesome. We absolutely those are all invited. Please give us your suggestions. But before that, we also have to invite their likes and subscriptions. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So please like this video. Please share this video with,
Subscribe to the channel. Yeah,
yes,
I'll
absolutely.
get it down.
Yes. Okay. So that's it for today. Meet you in the next episode.
Absolutely. Thanks. See ya.
Thank you. Yes, see you.